a budget, 2022 federal budget, that reflects the key aspirations of the Nigerian people. So first of all, let's start with the review of the key parameters of the budget. In the first place, we welcome the idea that the budget was presented on time so that the legislature will have enough time to go through and be able to pass the budget before the end of the year, so that once the president assents to it, the budget can kick off on the 1st of January 2022. We also welcome the fact that the government was honest enough to talk about its revenue challenges, which has also been reflected in the issues around debt, as well as the revenue enhancement measures that they seek to introduce, the comprehensiveness of including the estimates and the revenues and expenditure of 63 government-owned expenditure, government-owned enterprises, which makes the budget more comprehensive. And of course, the idea that we want to grow revenue in the short to medium term. We also note the key challenges which have arisen, especially if we look at the budget performance in 2021, which has been carried over, as well as the absence of an evaluation of results of programs financed with budgetary activities year after year. The executive prepares budgets and sends to National Assembly for approval, but they failed to look at the requirements of Section 19D of the Fiscal Responsibility, and we say specifically that the executive must report to the legislature and the Nigerian people on what they achieved with the money that was voted for them in the previous term. And by that we mean not just saying you have released so much amount of money, what was achieved, how many new jobs did you create, how many children that were out of school did you use the money to bring back to school, how did you improve the health of the population. Of course, there are other issues called development targets and the fiscal targets appendix, which means that as you are presenting the budget, you're also talking about the targets, the achievements you wish to make through expenditure, not just the fact of spending money for the sake of spending money. Now we go to section 2 of the report, which looks at the key assumptions and macroeconomic framework. We noted that the budget of 16.39 trillion is 12.5% higher than the revised 2021 budget, which is a total of 14.57 trillion. Okay, we also noted that the proposed return revenue, which is about 10.13 trillion, including grants and revenues from 63 government-owned enterprises, is 24.8% more than the 2021 revised budget estimates return revenue of 8.12 trillion. And we also noted the deficit of 6.26 trillion, which represents 3.39% of the GDP. Of course, it has exceeded the 3% rule in the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the Finance Act 2020. We shall come to that in due course. The key assumptions are the budget benchmark price of $57 per barrel, oil daily production of 1.88 barrels per day, including 300,000 barrels per day of condensates, an average exchange rate of 410.15 to the dollar. The real GDP expected to grow by 4.20, while inflation is projected at 13%. The first issue we take up here is the exchange rates. The projection of 410.15 we think is contentious, and the majority of Nigerians do not get forex at this rate. We see a situation where the CBN is still continuing the different exchange rates, the CBN rate, the I&E window, then the parallel market, which they don't want to acknowledge, but that's the market from where majority of Nigerians access foreign exchange. So we are proposing that there should be a unified exchange rate which will eliminate arbitrage and the distortions associated with people accessing foreign exchange at the official rate and round tripping to sell it at the black market rate and earning quite a lot of money. We also worked out that if you look at the Nigerian production of crude oil alone, if you benchmark it at the official exchange rate of 410.15, if that's the rate of conversion, it will give you about 16 trillion. But if you convert at 571, that will give you about 22 trillion, which is a difference about 6.2 trillion. So we are saying that let's be realistic. even if we are going to find a middle term, but let's not shortchange those who share from the federation account, because more resources could possibly have been released to them if the proper rates were used. In inflation, we are currently doing not less than 17%, and there's a projection of getting it down to 13%. We believe that this may not be realized, because if you look at the way the things are going, we are an import-dependent economy, and if you look at the projection, imports are going to increase up to 33 trillion. And of course, there has been clamors for the removal of fuel subsidy and the reduction of electricity tariffs. If all this go on, coupled with insurgency, which is depriving a lot of people from farming, the likelihood of reduction of inflation will not be there, because as the currency depreciates and we're import dependent, that means the inflation, the price of those goods that are coming in from outside Nigeria will definitely be translated into Naira, making sure that the price of goods and services and commodities will shoot up. We noted the 4.2% projected growth and said, well, it may be realistic, but we consider that a government that wants to lift 100 million people out of poverty cannot be projecting a growth rate of 4.2% at a time the population growth is about 3%, which means concretely and substantially we are not growing more than 1.2%. Then we looked at oil production and the benchmark price. 1.88 million barrels a day is realistic, but if we look at what we've been doing in the last couple of months since January, we've not been meeting our OPEC quota. We said it's realistic in the first instance because we have installed capacity to produce 2.5 million barrels per day. But of late, we've never been near that, and we've not been meeting our OPEC quota. So for us to realize this, we need to remove the bottlenecks and the binding constraints on crude oil production so that we can be able to meet it. Otherwise, that may not be possible. The benchmark price of $15 per barrel is realistic given the current price of crude oil. You know, crude oil today is much more than this and is expected to shoot up further. And we think that the price will be realized, especially in consideration of the global economic recovery post-COVID and the geopolitics of the international oil markets. Then let's look at the revenue framework of the budget. In looking at the revenue framework, we look at the projections and we want to benchmark how realistic they are using the actual revenue inflow in 2021 as a guide for both oil and non-oil revenue. We are discussing the statistics available, which is January to August 2021. Oil revenue inflow was 3.934 trillion as against the prorated expectation of 5.414 trillion, which is a minus 27% variance. So in essence, FGI shares of oil revenue underperformed by 43.7%, despite the fact that oil benchmark price was $40 per barrel, but the actual was $65 per barrel. We understand the above performance was facilitated by shortfalls in oil production, as well as issues of cost recovery by NNPC, so that the more the price shot up, the more the so-called subsidy or the recovery, whatever it is called, because we are importing all the refined petroleum products we are using here, and we are told the pump price is low. So we are saying that if we continue with the subsidy and the oil price keeps going up, we are not going to realize the projection for oil revenue. Then we looked at the share of Nigerian liquefied gas dividend, which was prorated at 139.03 billion, while the actual was 78.20 billion, being a variance of 43.7%. So this projection appears very optimistic based on the 2021 performance.